Good evening, and welcome to the spooking hour. Actually, there's no proper title for what the hell this is, but good evening, good evening. I'm sure it's late for some of you, still light out for others, but we're here to have a good time. Read some scary stories while in the room with the lovely fireplace back there. I am your ever grateful host, Ricky T. Bones, and I'm kind of nervous about this for some reason. Maybe it's because I don't get to hide behind a game. Welcome back, Chuck. Also, good evening to Honeybee, Dahlia Inkheart, and of course, Chuck, as I previously mentioned before, and to any lurkers out there who might be listening in, welcome on in. And to any VOD watchers out there enjoying the chill, spooky vibes for this one, we salute you. Now, this is going to be a collection of tales that I've gathered. Still no job, yep. I am in the process of still applying for some. Don't worry, I got it under control. And I have here an actual book. This is not just a prop, this is an actual thing in my hands. And we're going to be reading a selection from, let's see, Edgar Allen Poe, Nathaniel Hawthorne, H.P. Lovecraft, which I'm surprised I actually found a decent one, and a couple of short tales from a collection called Don't Turn Out the Lights, presented by the Horror Writers Association, edited by Jonathan Maberry. I should have linked to my resources in the description, actually. Let me do that real quick, if you don't mind. I probably don't want yours, B, but I appreciate the sentiment. Okay. Let me just put this in because it's a great resource. First off, we have AmericanLiterature.com and Don't Turn Out the Lights by John with a Jon, then Maberry. Nice. Glad to hear. Anyone, by the way, me and Dolly, the way me and Dolly were joking is, Dahlia's car gave up on the highway today. So, that new alternator can't come any sooner, I reckon. Or we reckon. Alright. I think there's not really much beating around the bush here. I'll take a sip, pray that the food goes down nicely, and doesn't come back up as I'm trying to speak tomes. Now. Sick. Best of luck to you, Dahlia. Now, this is mostly going to be me reading. I'm not going to really be interacting with chat as I normally do. So, if you'd like to put me on in the background as you're working, or perhaps as you're gaming, this would be the best time. But for now, I am going to get knee-deep into character and begin narrating our first tale. The Funeral Portrait by Laurent Lynn from Don't Turn Out the Lights. Terror was about to infect the kingdom, and panic spread like a virus. Queen Benevola balanced on the edge of death, and her only child, Malvino Mandamas, was next in line. He would become king. As intensely as the kind queen was beloved, her demoniac son, Mandamas, was despised. But the royal family wielded power. Nothing could be done. Or so everyone believed. And I forgot to do something almost immediately. Give me a moment. It's getting juicy, don't worry, but I need to fix something. I completely forgot to fix this. Enjoy your lurking, Tony. Okay. There we go. And now I'm in action. Perfect. Now, where were we? Senora Alma's acclaimed lineage reached as far back as the royal families. She and her ancestors performed one solemn duty, painting the royal funeral portraits. And so, on her deathbed, knowing her long life was at its end, Queen Benevola summoned the revered portrait artist to fulfill her task. Supported by a simple wooden cane and wrapped in a black shawl, the reclusive painter dutifully arrived at the palace to create the painting. Oh, come on in, Flash. We're just getting started on our first story. Tales of old, wrinkled Senora Alma and her accomplished legacy spanned generations. Some said she was 100 years old, maybe even 2. No matter her true age, She was distinctly skilled and painted the queen's funeral portrait with unparalleled speed, for just as Senora Alma applied the last dab of pigment to the canvas, the queen exhaled her last breath. "How fortunate," Senora Alma said. "I was able to paint her while she was still alive." Queen Benevola's remains rested in the Galleria, a long hallway with carved paneling and trembling candlelight. Most striking were the life-sized oil paintings, centuries of royal funeral portraits that lined the walls of the gallery like a timeline of compassion, occasionally punctured by tyranny, all with penetrating painted eyes. At the end was the funeral portrait of the queen's father, King Tirano, a despot who had ruled with vicious cruelty. His seething glare was chilling, even if only caught on canvas. But next to that, above her casket, now hung Queen Benevola's glorious funeral portrait, an uncanny likeness. While the folds of her turquoise gown had the illusion of her being true velvet, and the rubies of her crown looked like they reflect... Need to warm up my mouth, apparently. While the folds of her turquoise gown had the illusion of being true velvet, and the rubies of her crown looked like they reflected actual flame, the rendering of the queen herself stole one's breath. It was as if pulsing blood flowed through the applied pigments of her skin, and a vivid spirit shone through her painted gaze. When Senora Alma arrived in the Galleria to pay her last respects, the gathered nobility and commodores showered her, with the legendary painter, with praise. "You are too kind." Senora Alma admired her masterpiece. "I simply attempt to replicate in paint what I glean from the person's soul." A noblewoman scowled up at the portrait of King Tirano. "You certainly gleaned what was in him," she shuddered. "It's as if the painting stares through me." Senora Alma frowned at the portrayal of the previous king that she had painted so many years before. "I captured him all too well, didn't I?" A commanding voice boomed through the Galleria. "Where is that woman?" Everyone turned. It was the newly crowned King Malvino Mandamas himself. Strutting beside him was his 11-year-old son, Prince Consentito, who had the eyes of his grandmother, but the bearing of his father. "Senora Alma," the new King Mandamas barked. "The way you painted my mother is impressive." He put his hands on his hips. "You will paint my portrait." Everyone gasped. Everyone knew the old proverb. It was perilous to have one's funeral portrait painted when one was still in their prime. Prince Consentito interrupted. "What about me? I want a portrait too." "Quiet!" Mandamas shoved his son away. "I'm the king." "But King Mandamas," a groveling court minister said. What about the fate of your grandfather, King Tirano? He had Senora Alma paint his portrait when he was young, and look what happened. It brought the curse." A slight grin started to light on Senora Alma's face, but she quickly extinguished it, and resumed her somber expression. "You think I believe that stupidity?" King Mandamas said. "When my likeness hangs in this hall, someday it will resemble me now, when I'm young and handsome, not when I'm old and sickly." He waved his hand up at Queen Benevola's portrait. He is tempting fate indeed. Senora Alma bowed as low as her elderly bones would allow. "Sire, I cannot break from my family's tradition, and will paint your funeral portrait only once. To capture you in your full glory, I must first observe what kind of ruler you will be." Well, come on in, Gavin. Just getting started on the first spooky story of the night. King Mandamas huffed, then glanced up at his mother's portrait. Her painted amber eyes sparkled, no doubt merely a reflection of the flickering candlelight. "I'll be the greatest ruler. You'll see," Return in a year's time, and be prepared. He spun around on his heel and left with Prince Consentito pouting behind him. In the course of that year, King Mandamas wasted no time in unleashing his brutality. If someone looked at him the wrong way, he plucked out their eyes. If offended by someone's words, he extracted their teeth, one by one. And then their tongue. Fear and horror billowed throughout the kingdom like smoke. And while King Mandamas carried out his increasingly savage acts, Senora Alma continued honing her enigmatic craft. As it had always been for generations of her family, no one was allowed to enter her studio. Her methods were secret. Excuse me. Canvas after canvas of life-sized animal portraits encircled the humble space. None were of noble pets or well-bred steeds as one might expect. Instead, they were strikingly realistic representations of common sewer rats and rabid raccoons, all with a spark in their painted eyes. In the center of the room rested a battered cage containing the still warm carcass of a bloodthirsty coyote, its just completed portrait looming on an easel nearby. The legendary artist never practiced by painting people, the reason known only to her. When the year had passed, Senora Alma arrived at the palace bringing her art materials, a weathered easel, and an enormous black canvas. King Mandamas glared from the summit of his throne. "You shall paint my portrait this time." At that, the guards stepped forward in unison and surrounded her, their swords clanking against their armor. Senora Alma placed her cane to the side. "As you wish, your highness. It is clear to all what kind of ruler you have become, and so I shall gladly capture your likeness." The entire court gathered as Senora Alma stood still and closed her eyes. While she took slow breaths, the watching crowd held theirs. Suddenly, her eyes flashed open, focused on the king. Without breaking her gaze, she thrust out her hand, playing her fingers across her brushes like she was a musician, like the way a musician tests the keys of a harpsichord. Selecting a bold brush, she began painting the curve of his shoulder. When the pigment-tipped brush touched the blank canvas, the king twitched and slapped his shoulder. A slight numbness spread down his arm, as he suspected a bee had stung him, but he held his pose. A king isn't bothered by an insignificant bee. However, as Senora Alma continued, the king faltered. Just as the master painted applied the perfect rose tones to the canvas, the king's rosy cheeks paled, and as she dabbled crimson on the lips of his depiction, King Mandamas's own mouth began to blend away into his increasingly sallow complexion. The murmurs spread. "Look! He is cursed for having his portrait painted too soon!" The onlookers gasped. "Just like his grandfather!" Senora Alma smiled to herself. This enduring false rumor of a curse masked the truth and served her well. She alone knew the power she possessed. "I'm fine," the king protested when asked about his health. But something wasn't right. Increasingly drained of his vitality, he knew no bee sting could have this effect. It sent a shiver through his heart. Was it poison? A plague? No matter what, he could not display no weakness. He knew any hint of vulnerability would be his end. His enemies would pounce. Now delusional, he even feared his own son, Prince Consentito, might snatch the throne. But the young prince only gasped in confusion. "Father! Is it the curse? You must stop!" Paranoid and suspecting a trick, King Mandamas flapped his hand at Senora Alma. "Quick, old woman! Paint swiftly! I want this finished!" She stood tall. "Certainly, your highness. I'm sure we all want this finished." The faster she progressed, the more rapidly the king faded. Fortunately, Senora Alma was able to complete his portrait just in time. For as she applied 2 last dabs of paint to the pupils of his eyes, he slumped to the ground, dead. Trembling with shock, Prince Consentino approached his father's funeral portrait. Something about the painting's lifelike gaze pulled at him, almost against his will. Senora Alma placed a surprisingly firm hand on the boy's shoulder and whispered, "Your Majesty, we will be eagerly observing. What kind of ruler will you be?" The boy stared at the painting. A small drop of red paint puddled in the rim of the portrait's right eye, then ran down the flat of his cheek like a teardrop of blood. "I wonder when I will paint you," Senora Alma said, searching the boy's face. "When will I capture your soul?" Harrowing. I think it's an Asian lore, or Eastern lore, where they say the cameras can capture the soul. That takes it a step further with the paintings. And to think your victim must stand still and willingly take it. Whew. Enjoy your dinner, Chuck. There's more where that came from, don't worry. Well, there's more where that came from, unfortunately. Alright, let's see here. Next story. My grandparents got a painting, and we swear its eyes follow us when we pass it. Yeah, I know the feeling. It's uncanny. A word in the title. What the hell you mean? What? I'm gonna disregard that one, Gavin. I think you're reading too much into it. Spooky, yes. Alright, let's see. The next one. Well, it doesn't mean I won't be insensitive, but I'm afraid I'm not going to change it. That word is used everywhere. And there are plenty of things out in the world that have double meanings. Harmless in some cultures, harmful in others. And I will not change it, I'm sorry to say. I have heard the term used to describe FBI members, but I've never heard it coined as a slur. But yeah, it'll stay. But thank you for letting me know. You know, like the sign of the horns that's so prevalent in metal media means infidelity in some other cultures, and so I always have to worry about which context to use it in. But interesting info. I'll keep that in mind. Let's see. There we are. The next story is The Carved Bear by Brendan Reichs. See how that fits. Yeah, it fits well. Just go ahead and resize that a little bit. Another creepy tale from Don't Turn Out the Light. And yet again, these can be gruesome and terrifying. Perfect spine chillers for the spooky season. The little wooden bear had twinkling eyes made of shiny blue glass. Twinkling eyes yet again. This seems to be a running theme. A brown nose, cute rounded belly, small enough to fit in one's palm, and it sat on a craftswoman's cart with the front paws extended, as if seeking a hug, its chiseled lips tilted in a shy smile. Yet something about the carving unsettled Kara. Looking again, she saw that the bear's mouth wasn't grinning so much as leering. Sharp teeth lurked like tiny diamonds. The eyebrows angled downward slightly in what felt like a glare. Its miniature paws were tipped by delicate claws, as likely to rend as to embrace. A chill traveled down Kara's spine. It was just a silly little carving, but she felt like the bear's eyes followed her as she backed away from the rickety old cart parked at the edge of the village market. Kara decided she wanted to be somewhere else. Her brother Elam felt no such discomfort. He was staring at the wooden bear, a greedy glint to his sharp green eyes. Kara began to worry. Elam didn't have any money, but that hadn't always stopped him from in the past when he wanted something. Alright then. It looked as if Elam really wanted the car and right then, it looked as if Elam really wanted the carved wooden bear. Kara tugged on her brother's sleeve. "Come on, Elam, let's go. We're late for home." Elam nodded, but his eyes never left the cart. A whip cracked behind her, and Kara spun, her nerves on edge. It was only a passing coach. When she turned back, Elam was hurrying into the road, his hands shoved deeply into the pockets of his trousers. Kara experienced a moment of panic. She lurched after him, but guilt caused her to glance back over her shoulder. She froze. The craftswoman was glowing in their direction as Elam skirted away. Kara stiffened. Stupid Elam and his stupid sticky fingers! But the dark-eyed woman merely shook her head once and turned away, releasing Kara from the prison of her icy gaze as she addressed a potential customer. Kara sagged in relief and then sped after Elam, her anger growing with each step. "Elam!" she hissed when she drew alongside him. "What did you do?" "Nothing." But he wouldn't meet her eye. As twins, they could never lie to each other. She always knew when Elam did, and for her part, Kara always told the truth. "Elam, that woman saw you," Kara breathed. She still couldn't believe that the crone hadn't pursued them. Why had she let Elam steal from her? How did he always get so lucky? "She didn't, or she'd have come after me," Elam said. A nasty smirk stole across his face. "Because I do have something she'll miss." He pulled the wooden bear from his pocket and bounced it in one hand. Kara's temper flared white-hot again, but it quickly blurred to confusion. The bear her brother was casually tossing wasn't the one she'd seen in the cart. No kidding. The blue eyes were the same, but this bear was frowning darkly. Its bushy arms crossed over its chest. Had there been two carvings and she'd only seen one? "Come on," Elam said, jamming the pilfered carving into his pocket. "We are late and want to play with my new friend later. If you weren't such a priss, you'd have one too." Bet you got King Ramses. No kidding. Elam picked up the pace, forcing Kara to trot along the packed dirt road. Neither spoke for the rest of the long walk home. Elam was cheerful throughout dinner, complimenting their mother's cooking and nodding at their father's sage advice. Kara fumed silently, upset by the world's unfairness. Her brother always got away with everything. She never broke the rules, but where did that get her? Nowhere, as far as she could tell. Not an ounce of... Nowhere. As far as she could tell, not an ounce of credit in the 12 years she and Elam had been vying for their parents' attention. Elam glanced at her once, and stuck out his tongue when their parents weren't looking. He knew his sister would never snitch, no matter what, and was enjoying her foul mood. Kara sank deeper into a chair and gnawed grimly on a carrot. After dinner, the twins finished their chores and were given free time to play. Elam produced his stolen bear and pranced it around the parlor, making it say funny things and caper wildly before the fire. Their parents laughed, accepting his story of a lucky find down by the river. Kara bit her tongue and tried to read, but the fairy tales had lost their appeal. Finally, it was bedtime. No playthings during rest hours, their father admonished sternly. Elam set the wooden bear on the mantel and scampered to the twins' shared bedroom. After washing, they both climbed into their beds, one smilingly smug, the other thoroughly annoyed and grateful for the day's end. The lamps were doused, and Kara hunted for the release of sleep. She nearly drifted off when a floorboard creaked outside their bedroom door. She sat up in bed and felt Elam do the same. "Huh?" he called out. No answer came. Kara felt a chill lift the hairs on her neck, the same ill feeling she had by the craftswoman's cart. She heard Elam grumble, get out of bed, and light a candle. The slender flame bobbed toward the door. Elam opened it, and then sucked in a breath of surprise. The little wooden bear was in the center of the hallway just outside their door. The figurine gleamed as if drawing in the candlelight. But even stranger, Kara noticed that it was now down on all fours, its face locked in a snarl. The blue eyes glittered. Elam lifted the carving, scratching his head. "Weird. Does this look different to you?" he asked his sister. Kara was nearly unable to answer. "I think you should take it back," she whispered. "Take it back?" Elam shot her a disgusted look. "After all the trouble I went to steal it? Who would do such a thing?" He squinted down at the bear, then shook his head. "Wonder why Ma put it out here." Before Kara could answer, Elam slapped it on the dresser beside the door. Then he trudged back to his bed, got under the covers, and blew out the candle. In moments, light snores rose from his pile of blankets. Kara found sleep more elusive. She couldn't stop thinking about the bear, or the craftswoman's dire expression as she turned away. Had the bear really changed shape since Elam took it without paying? She wished he hadn't brought it into the bedroom. Her weariness finally won over, and she fell into a dreamless slumber. But a short time later, another floorboard groaned, this time inside their room. Kara shot up in bed, an unknown dread squeezing her heart, her ears detecting a scurrying sound, and she broke into a cold sweat. "Elam, wake up!" she shouted. Elam rolled over on his pillow. "What is it? Why are you bothering me now? Light the candle, Elam." "What? Just do it!" After a string of petulant curses, Kara heard Elam fumbling with the matches. Candlelight bloomed, forming a pale circle. Kara leaned over and peered into the gloom. The little wooden bear was in the center of the floor between their beds. The carving now stood on its hind legs, paws raised, and gleaming claws extended, its jaws cracked in what could only be a fearsome growl. Kara felt her blood run cold. "Elam?" "The bear. It moved, and it changed shape again." "Don't be silly," Elam scoffed, but his voice carried a quiver. "It's a carving. Candlelight fools the eyes, is all." Kara shook her head. "Elam, it was on the dresser. You need to get rid of it. Put it outside somewhere, and then take it back tomorrow." Elam's head whipped around, eyes narrowing. I see your plan, sister, he snarled. You think to prank me with my own prize, so that I take it back like a dimwit. You're jealous. So you're playing a cruel game in the dark while I sleep. Kara's eyes widened. Elam! No! I swear it! Elam hopped out of bed and kicked the wooden bear into the corner of the room. Enough! The bear is mine. I stole it clean. Now leave off and go to bed. If you don't, you'll find your dolls floating in the well tomorrow. Elam, please! I didn't Not one more word! He blew out the candle and yanked the blanket over his head. Kara choked back a panicked moan. She'd only wake up their parents, and they'd be angry with her for disturbing their rest. Plus, they'd never believe her story. Kara wasn't sure of it herself. Maybe a draft had blown the bear off the dresser. Maybe its face got chipped in the fall, making her see things that weren't there. With no other recourse, Kara pulled the covers tight and hid her face, praying for morning to come. She vowed not to sleep at all, perking her ears and listening for the slightest sound. She heard nothing for hours. Then her body betrayed her, and Kara dozed off. She awoke to the first slanting rays of dawn. Yawning, it took her a moment to remember her fright from the night before. She scrambled upright and looked to her brother, but the pile of blankets still covered his bed completely. Kara began to feel very foolish. She glanced at the corner where the wooden bear had been kicked, then squinted in confusion. It wasn't there. Kara turned back to her brother's bed. The chill returned, deeper than before, seeping all the way down to her bones. Kara took a calming breath, reached over, and pulled back the covers. Dark stains covered the sheets, which were torn to shreds. A pillow had been ripped open, its feathers sticking in viscous liquid. In the center of it all was the little wooden bear. Its body dyed scarlet from the waist down. Angry red smears covered its mouth and claws. The carving reclined on its back with its tongue lolling out, both hands wrapped around its belly. A wicked smile split its face, but it didn't touch those cold blue eyes. Kara screamed. Her parents rushed in and shouted in horror, demanding to know where Elam was. But Kara snatched the bear and ran from the room without speaking a word. She bolted out of the house, down the road, and all the way back to where the craftswoman's cart had been the day before. But when she arrived, the cart was gone. Only muddy ruts signifying it had ever existed. Kara sat down and began to cry, flinging the bear to the ground in helpless despair. She heard it thud against something else. Dabbing her eyes, she spotted another wooden carving lying in the wet grass. She lifted it clear and wiped it with her fingers. It was a blonde-haired boy with polished green eyes, standing in denim overalls. Elam, Kara breathed, her pulse thundering. The boy's engraved face stretched in an expression of horror, its hands reaching out as if for help. Kara hugged the carving to her chest and sobbed silently. Then she put the tiny figurine in her pocket and started the long walk home. She didn't tell her distraught parents what happened. They'd never believe her. Instead, she set the statue of her brother on the dresser, where the bear had been, and crawled into bed, shuddering at the blank space where Elam's mattress should have been. Sleep took her immediately, and it was several hours before she blinked awake. Kara sat up, felt a prickle run down her back. She looked over and found the statue of her brother sitting on her bedside table. The boy was now leaning back with his ankles crossed, smirking, one wooden finger resting on its opposite shoulder. As Kara watched, unable to blink, the finger slid slowly across the statue's neck. A green eye winked, then froze in place. Kara swallowed. Fresh tears spilled from her eyes. She lifted the carving to her lips and kissed it once. Then she walked to the living room and tossed it into the roaring fireplace. The end. Crime never pays. In more ways than this. But that's a great way to tell your kids to never steal. Whew. God, in a weird way that reminds me of Digimon, and I won't go into details why. Alright. Magic cam through the bear? Something like that. Maybe it was a whole cart full of magical trinkets. These are wild, yeah, and they're only like 10 pages long if you can believe it. They put so much detail into so few pages. It's amazing. Alright, let me switch to the next story and then I will read a much longer one. There we go. Okay. Now this one was a request. And if you thought these were wild, oh buddy, you ain't heard nothing yet. Let's see. I'll go ahead and read this one. I read this a long time ago, I believe for the very first spooky story reading. But it's worth a repeat. This is The Telltale Heart, written by Edgar Allen Poe, a favorite author of mine, a brilliant wordsmith, and always told from a first-person perspective, so if you'll forgive me, I'm going to get massively and possibly disturbingly into character. Okay, quick sip. True, nervous. Very dreadfully nervous I had been, and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease that sharpened my senses not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all else, the sense of hearing was acute. I heard all things in heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How, then, am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthily, how calmly, I tell you the whole story. It is impossible to tell how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object, there was none. Passion, there was none. I loved the old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. Yes, it was this. One of his eyes resembled that of a vulture, a pale blue eye with film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold, and so by degrees, very gradually, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing, but you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went to work. Mad bones, hell yeah. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed, so that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well within the room, I undid the lantern cautiously, oh, so cautiously. Cautiously, for the hinges creaked, I undid it, just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And I did this for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work, for it was not the old man that vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning, when day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone, and inquiring how he had passed the night. So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed, to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him as he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hands moves more quickly than mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed so suddenly, as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch, with thick darkness, for the shutters were close fastened through fear of robbers, and so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing on it, steadily, steadily. I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern, when my thumb slipped on the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour I did not move a muscle, and in the meantime, I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in bed and listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently, I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not the groan of pain or grief. Oh, no! It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it is swelled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt, and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise. When he had turned in his bed, his fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself, "It is nothing but the wind in the chimney. It is only the mouse crossing the floor," or "It is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp." Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found them all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim, and it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence of my head within the room. When I had waited a very long time, very patiently, without hearing him lie down, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until at length a single dim ray, like the thread of a spider, shot out from the crevice, and full upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw with perfect distinctness an all dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And now, have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of the drum stimulates a soldier into courage. But even yet, as I refrained and kept still, I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say louder, every minute. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now at the dead hour of night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still, but the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst, and now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leaped into the room. He shrieked once, and once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him, and then I smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes his heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. It was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off his head, and then the arms, and then the legs. Then I took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber, and deposited all between the scantlings. Then I replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatsoever. I had been too wary for that. A tub had caught all! And when I made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock. Still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart. For what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men, who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by the neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputized to search the premises. I smiled. For what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man I mentioned was absent in country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs in the room, and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in the wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and, while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale, and wished them gone. My head ached. I fancied a ringing in my ears. But still, they sat and chatted. The ringing became more distinct, and it continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definitiveness, until at length I found the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently, with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observation of the men, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore, I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting, and grated upon the boards, but the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard it not? Almighty God, no, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think. But anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now, again, hark! Louder! Louder! Villains! I shrieked. Dissemble no more! I admit the deed! Tear up the planks! Here! Here! It is the beating of his hideous heart! Not mad. Stark, raving mad. And so ends the tale of the telltale heart. Whew. That's one to get your heart beating. Thank you, thank you. Oh, I know. It's a fun little exercise in acting. Not having any props, only having the theater of your mind. Ah, it's a grand time to be a spooky time enjoyer. All right, and now we return to the book. And more gruesome tales await us. That's a compliment for somebody who's doing what I do. I appreciate it. It's very, like I've said before, it's rare that I get to play villains in any sort of medium. Obviously, in real world, I would... What am I saying? That's a stupid thing to say. It's very rare that I get to play villains or madmen. It's very freeing too. Like any good playwright. It's just a lot of fun to play around in that headspace. Terrifying too, to some extent, depending on the character. Now this is The Golden Peacock by Althea Contis. And this, I don't know what it is, but the more modern the tale, the more they are not sparing anyone in the story. This is your fair warning. Gus and Angela Vasilikis inherited the painting from one of Angela's great aunts. The frame itself was nondescript, a plain square of rough wood, about an arm's length on each side. But inside that frame, painstakingly crafted from pigments and oils, was the gorgeous rendered eye of one feather from a golden peacock. Ancient Greeks said that the eyes that decorate a peacock's feathers were a tribute to the 100-eyed giant who had faithfully served as the goddess Hera's watchdog. The feather's eye in this painting, however, was based on the eye of a real-life girl, an Ottoman Greek descendant of the Byzantine emperors. Some of Angela's relatives said that the girl had perished in the fires of the Greek genocide. Others argued that the painting was older, saying that the girl had lived during the reign of the Trebizond Empire. No one had so much as a clue about the painter, but all the stories agreed on one thing, that the girl's name was Melora. Melora's eye had watched over Angela's family for as long as anyone could remember. Not that it mattered to the casual observer. Not that it mattered. To the casual observer, the painting looked like nothing more than a close-up of a beautiful, shimmering peacock feather. The painting had hung prominently over the old aunt's fireplace until she passed away. Gus and Angela had a baby, a happy little girl named Phoebe, with a head full of white golden ringlets and eyes the color of polished olive wood. When Angela received the painting, she and her husband hung it in Phoebe's room so that Melora could watch over their precious daughter. The bright peacock's feather looked right at home above Phoebe's dresser. Yeah, you can see where this is going. When Phoebe was 4, she began telling stories about an imaginary friend named Melora. "Sweetheart, where did you hear the name Melora?" asked Angela. "Melora told me," Phoebe answered. Gus decided to play along. "Where did you meet Melora?" "Here, in my room," said Phoebe. "She's always been here." The way she said it made it sound like a fact, and not like she was playing pretend. It creeped Gus out. "Did you tell her about the painting in her room?" he asked his wife. "I don't remember," Angela shrugged. "Maybe." "Your family has a million stories about this painting. Do any of them sound like this?" Gus asked, nodding at their daughter. "No," said Angela. When Phoebe was 5, she grew a stubborn streak. In turn, according to Phoebe, Melora had become just as argumentative as her playmate. One particularly quiet day, Gus went into Phoebe's bedroom in search of his daughter, and found Phoebe in the closet. "Hey, why are you in here, Pumpkin?" "Melora got mad and said I had to stay in here," said Phoebe. "Aren't imaginary friends supposed to be nice?" Gus asked his daughter. "Melora's not imaginary," said Phoebe. "She just is." Gus wasn't sure what to say to that. He did not understand imaginary playmates, but he understood bullies. "Well, the next time you two fight, tell her that it's her turn to stay in the closet." "Okay, Daddy." Later that night, well past her bedtime, Phoebe turned up in her parents' room. "Hey, what's the matter, sweetheart?" "I can't sleep," said Phoebe. "Melora's crying." "Aw, why is Melora crying?" asked Angela. "Daddy told me to lock her in the closet next time we fought. She's been crying for hours. She says I'm not fair." Gus sighed at his daughter's imagination. "That's not Melora, honey. It's just the rain. It's storming outside. Just ignore it. I promise it'll be over soon." "Yes, Daddy," Phoebe said. The next night, Phoebe was back. "I can't sleep," she told her parents. "Melora keeps calling my name and won't stop. She says she's gonna do it to keep me awake all night long." "It's the wind," said Angela. "Just ignore it." "It will stop as soon as you go to sleep, Pumpkin," said Gus. "I promise." "Yes, Daddy," Phoebe said. The third night, Phoebe was back again. "Melora's scratching at the door. She's going to scratch me." "I'll be glad when she grows out of this Melora business," said Angela. "It's just her imagination," said Gus. I'll handle it." He got out of bed and went into Phoebe's bedroom to investigate. The street lamp shone through the tree outside the window, casting a pattern of shadows across the walls. The room was a little cold, but not uncomfortably so. Gus tried to see the room through the eye of a scattered 5-year-old, The closet door was open a crack. He shut it. He went through the motions of checking under the bed for monsters. Then he heard it. A soft scratch. Scratch. Phoebe and her father both jumped at the sound. "Laura's coming to get me," Phoebe whispered. When Gus's heart stopped pounding, he noticed the shadows in the room shifting. Laughing, he pulled back the sheer curtain. "It's just the tree outside, Pumpkin," said Gus. Phoebe tried to laugh too. "See? The branches here keep brushing up against the window. That's what's making the sound. Just pretend you are a rockabye baby being rocked back to sleep in the treetop." "Okay, Daddy," said Phoebe. Gus and Angela put heavier curtains in Phoebe's room to block out some of the shadows and sounds from the street. Angela also gave Phoebe one of her silky spa masks to sleep in. She told her daughter it was magic. It must have worked because Phoebe did not appear in their room that night, or the next night. On the third night, Gus stuck his head into his daughter's room to check on her. Phoebe was not in bed. After a terrified minute of frantic searching, Gus found Phoebe under her bed. "Hey, Pumpkin, it's Daddy," Gus said. "What are you doing under the bed?" Phoebe slid the overly large sleeping mask up to peek at her father. "Laura doesn't like my mask," she said. "It makes her say mean things." Gus was really starting to worry about his daughter's imagination. "What kind of mean things, Pumpkin? Did she say she was going to scratch you again?" "She says she's going to tear out my eyes," said Phoebe. "I'm hiding down here so she can't find me." Gus glanced around the dark, empty room. "Where is Melora right now, Pumpkin?" "She looks at me through the painting." Phoebe's tiny arm pointed to the peacock's feather on the wall above her dresser. "She's always watching." "That's it," said Gus. "I've had enough." And with that, he took the painting down off the wall. "What are you going to do with that?" Angela asked when she saw him with the painting. "I'm going to point it in the garage," he said. I don't ever want it in this house anymore." Angela smirked. "Just don't tell my aunts and uncles. They love that stupid painting. They practically worship the thing." "Then they can have it," Gus yelled as he walked out the door. Oh boy. The next morning, Phoebe came out of her room with the magical sleeping mask still over her eyes. "Did you get a good night's sleep, Pumpkin?" Gus asked. "Yes, Daddy. But I need Mommy to help me with the magic mask. I can't take it off." Gus reached down and removed his daughter's mask. Angela screamed. "Can you take the mask off, Mommy?" Phoebe asked. But the mask was off. Phoebe's beautiful olive eyes were gone. There was nothing beneath her flaccid eyelids but two gaping sockets of bloody, raw flesh. Gus ran out of the house. As much as he hated that horrible painting, and whatever wretched ghost of a girl lived inside it, he would hang it over the fireplace in a solid gold frame if it meant his daughter could have her eyes back. He searched the garage from top to bottom. The painting was nowhere to be found. So, the next time you visit a museum, or stay at a hotel, look to see if the painting is there. Every garage sale you go to, be sure to keep an eye out. The frame must have changed, but the painting will be the same. A young girl's eye, staring, unblinking, from the feather of a golden peacock. And if you ever happen to find it, be sure that it is hung in a place of importance and treated with the greatest respect. Because the next pair of eyes Melora takes could be yours." Now, thankfully, I don't have any eyes to steal, so I'm pretty much safe from Alora. Yeah. Every time you mention your job, B, I don't envy you. I envy your paycheck, but I don't envy you. Welcome back from the shift. Whew. What is it with the theme of getting children involved in these horror stories? Alright. This one's a bit more close to my heart. Let's see if I can find it. There it is. This one concerns a beautiful, elegant musical instrument, the cello. A step above being the deepest instrument in a quartet. It is an elegant piece, and not a cheap one either. I hate to break the mood, lighten the mood after a gruesome story like that, but go off, Queen. Live your truth. For this is Strange Music by Joanna Parepinski from Don't Turn Out the Lights. And as with everything, if you've made it this far, you know that viewer discretion is advised. There once was a girl named Janine, who was a very gifted cellist. But her parents did not have enough money to buy her an instrument of her own. She rented one at school, but it was a cheap, scratchy thing that never sounded quite right. So she saved her lunch money and collected lost coins from the couch cushions until at last she had enough to go to the music shop down the street and purchase her very own cello. The man who owned the music shop was a luthier, someone who makes classical instruments, and he crafted beautiful cellos in his workshop in the back of the store. No one ever went into his workshop but him. He was said to have a secret method for making the best instruments, with the most musical tones, that he wouldn't share with anyone else. When Janine walked into his shop, the luthier came out to help her pick her new cello from the rows of hand-carved instruments lining the walls. But when she pointed to each one in turn, and he gave her the price, she found that they were all too expensive for the little bundle of cash in her pockets. She tried to hide the tears of disappointment that welled in her eyes as she gazed with great longing at the elegant cellos that now seemed so far out of grasp. Eventually, the luthier went into his workshop and came out with a cello of richly colored, deep red wood. "I have just finished making this one," he told her, "and I will sell it to you for the amount in your pocket." Janine was overjoyed. Because it was the only one she could afford, she handed over the money without delay. The luthier also gave her a brand new bow with midnight black hair. As he handed it to her, he said, "This bow has special hair. I made it myself with my wife's help." Janine took it reverently, grateful to be given such a beautiful bow as this. Then the luthier picked up her new instrument, and as he handed it to her, he said, "This cello also has special strings. I made them myself with my wife's help." After supper that night, when her parents had gone to bed, Janine decided to try out her new cello. Eagerly, she touched the strings and the hard wooden body. The strings felt like catgut, which were made from the guts of animals like sheep or goats, the way they were made in olden times before the newer and now more common method of using steel. How beautiful these traditional strings must sound! She began to play the melancholic strains of Beethoven's Für Elise. And indeed, the strings made lovely, mournful harmonies. Beneath those harmonies, though, coming from the strings, She also heard a faint screaming, like that of someone far away in desperate agony. She froze, listening for the source of the sound. But as soon as she stopped playing, the screaming also stopped. Believing, after straining to hear it amid the silence, that she must have imagined it, she starts to play again. But as the rich tones sang from the cello, they rang again with the blood-curdling screams that chilled her to the bone. Desperately, she played louder and louder to drown out the terrible moans, but the more intensely she bowed, the more anguished and piercing the screams became, until they filled her ears with the sound of death. Trembling with fear, Janine let the bow slip from the strings, and silence fell heavy around her. She plucked one of the strings, and with its musical twang came a sharp cry. The sound was so awful that Janine felt it vibrate in her nerve endings. She could not play, she realized, without being haunted by the screaming cello. In the following days, each time she tried again to play, she found herself terrified to pull the bow across the strings, terrified of the strange music it made. She left the cello alone, which saddened her parents, but she could not explain to them why she refused to play. Her life became quiet and somber without her music. It was like missing a limb or losing a beloved pet, but no matter how much she longed to let her fingers dance upon the strings, the horrible sounds that came from the cello were too much to bear. Defeated, Janine finally decided to take the cello back to the music shop. When she got there, she found that the shop was closed. She knocked on the door, cupped her hands around her face to peer in the dark window, and knocked again. Then she ran up and down the street to the other shops to see if they knew where the luthier had gone, but they all shook their heads and shrugged. Finally, she went into the bakery, dragging her cello behind her. "Excuse me," she said to the woman behind the counter. "Do you know why the music shop is closed?" "Didn't you hear?" said the baker. "An awful thing. The luthier was arrested for murdering his wife. Her body was found in his workshop. Not only that," she continued, "but he was using her beautiful black hair to make his bows, and her intestines to make strings." Janine ran home with the image of the luthier's dead wife in his mind. She thought about lighting the cello on fire, but wondered if it would scream as it burned. Eventually, she got the bow re-haired at a music shop across town and changed the strings to new steel ones. After that, the cello sang only the notes she played. Her parents were overjoyed to hear music in the house once again, but she kept the original strings in a little box under her bed. When the trial was over, she was going to record a song to send to the luthier, so that he would have something to listen to in jail. It's like a clothesline out of nowhere, that one. Jeez. Just goes from 60 to 0 so quick. You'd figure, like, when you first hear about the strings, it's haunted. But no, it's human guts. God. Whew. I don't blame the girl. Yeah. Okay. Moving on. We have another long, old literature one. I thought the cat was haunting it, but when she mentioned it again, it clicked human. Hooey. Alright, let me see. What's the next one after this? 85. I've only read halfway through this book to collect these stories, so if you'd like to check this out from your local library and get the full 35 story collection and read it for yourself this Halloween time, highly encourage you. Don't Turn Out the Lights by Jonathan Maberry. Should have a copy at your local library. All right. Now this next one is more of an act and 2 parts. Less narration, more exasperation. And it's of classic literature. This is The Devil in Manuscript by Nathaniel... Oh dear. Hawthorne. Oh my, that's rather wide. Okay, let me double check something. Alright, just had to make sure. Oh, damn. Cool. Alright. On a bitter evening of December, I arrived by mail in a large town, which was then the residence of an intimate friend. One of those gifted youths who cultivates poetry and the belles letters, and calls themselves students at law. My first business, after supper, was to visit him at the office of his distinguished instructor. As I have said, it was a bitter night, clear starlight, but cold as Nova Zembla. The shop windows along the street being frosted, so as almost to hide the lights, while the wheels of coaches thundered equally loud over frozen earth and pavements of stone. There was no snow, either on the ground or on the roofs of houses. The wind blew so violently that I had to but spread my cloak like a mainsail and scud along the street at a rate of 10 knots, greatly envied by other navigators who were beating slowly up with the gale right in their teeth. One of these I capsized, but was gone on the wings before he could even vociferate an oath. Was gone on the wind. Wings of wind. Okay, I see what it means. One of these I capsized, but was gone on the wings of the wind before he could even vociferate an oath. After this picture of an inclement night, behold us seated by the great blazing fire. What? It's ye old English. Sorry, I'm losing my place here. After this picture of an inclement night, behold us seated by a great blazing fire, which looked so comfortable and delicious that I felt inclined to lie down and roll among the hot coals. The usual furniture of a lawyer's office was around us, rows of volumes in sheepskin, and a multitude of writs, summons, and other legal papers scattered over the desks and tables. But there were certain objects which seemed to intimate that we had little dread of the intrusion of clients, or that of the learned counselor himself, who indeed was attending court in a distant town. A tall decanter-shaped bottle stood on a table, between 2 tumblers, and beside a pile of blooded manuscripts, altogether dissimilar to any law documents recognized in our courts. My friend, who I shall call Oberon, it was a name of fancy and friendship between him and me. My friend, Oberon... Oh, I see. My friend, whom I shall call Oberon, it was a name of fancy and friendship between him and me. My friend Oberon looked at these papers with a peculiar expression of disquietude. "I do believe," he said soberly, "or at least I could believe, if I chose, that there is a devil in this pile of blotted papers. You have read them, and know what I mean. That conception in which I endeavor to embody the character of a fiend has represented in our traditions and the written records of witchcraft. Oh, I have horror of what was created in my own brain, and shudder at the manuscripts in which I gave that dark idea a sort of material existence. Would they were out of my sight!" "And mine too," thought I. "You remember," continued Oberon, how the hellish thing used to suck away the happiness of those who, by a simple concession that seemed almost innocent, subjected themselves to this power. Just so my piece is gone, and by all these accursed manuscripts. Have you felt nothing of the same influence? Nothing, replied I. Unless the spell be hid in desire to turn novelist after reading your delightful tales. Novelist? Exclaimed Oberon, half seriously. Then indeed my devil has its claw on you. You are gone. You cannot even pray for deliverance. But we will be the last and only victims. For this night, I mean to burn the manuscripts, and commit this fiend to his retribution in flames. Burn your tales? Repeated I, startled at the desperation of the idea. Even so, said the author despondingly. You cannot conceive what an effect the composition of these tales has on me. I have become ambitious of a bubble, and careless of solid reputation. I am surrounding myself with shadows which bewilder me by aping the realities of life. They have drawn me aside from the beaten path of the world and led me into a strange sort of solitude. A solitude in the midst of men, where nobody wishes for what I do, nor thinks or feels as I do. The tales have done all this. When they are ashes, perhaps I shall be as I was before they had existence. Moreover, the sacrifice is less than you may suppose, since nobody will publish them. That makes a difference indeed, said I. They have been offered. Hold on. Dust in the nasal cavities. Had to sneeze. They have been offered, by letter, continued Oberon, reddening with vexation, to some 17 booksellers. It would make you stare to read their answers, and read them you should, only that I burnt them as fast as they arrived. One man publishes nothing but school books, another has 5 novels already under examination. What a voluminous mass the unpublished literatures of America must be! Cried I. Oh, the Alexandrian manuscripts were nothing to it, said my friend. Well, another gentleman is just giving up business on purpose, I verily believe, to escape publishing my book. Several, however, would not absolutely decline the agency, on my advancing half the cost of an edition, and giving bonds for the remainder, besides a high percentage themselves, whether the book sells or not. Another advises a subscription. The villain! exclaimed I. A fact, said Oberon. In short, of all the 17 booksellers, only one has vouchsafed even to read my tales, and he, a literary dabbler himself, I should judge, has the impertinence to criticize them, proposing what he calls vast improvements and concluding, after a general sentence of condemnation, with the definitive assurance that he will not be concerned on any terms. It might not be amiss to pull that fellow's nose, remarked I. If the whole trade has one common nose, there would be some satisfaction in pulling it, answered the author. But there does seem to be one honest man among the 17 unrighteous ones, and he tells me fairly that no American publisher will meddle with an American work, seldom if known by a known writer, and never by a new one, unless at the writer's risk. The paltry rogues, cried I. Will they live by literature and yet risk nothing for its sake? But after all, you might publish on your own account. And so I might, replied Oberon. But the devil of the business is this. These people have put me so out of conceit with their tales, that I loathe the very thought of them, and actually experience a physical sickness of the stomach whenever I glance at them on the table. I tell you there is a demon in them. I anticipate a wild enjoyment in seeing them in blaze, such as I should feel in taking vengeance on an enemy, or destroying something noxious. I did not very strenuously oppose this determination, being privately of opinion, in spite of my partiality for the author, that his tales would make a more brilliant appearance in the fire than anywhere else. Before proceeding to the execution, we broached the bottle of champagne which Oberon had provided for keeping up his spirits in this doleful business. Thank you for dropping by, Ryan. I hope your evening goes well. Thank you for doing us a fantastic backflipping act. We swallowed each a tumbleful. In sparkling commotion, it went bubbling down our throats and bright in our eyes at once. but left my friend sad and heavy as before. He drew the tales towards him with a mixture of natural affection and natural disgust, like a father taking a deformed infant into his hands. Ooh! Tiramisu and a little bit of dinner. Sounds delightful. Enjoy. Also, Elliot Noir. Hoo-hoo! You're gonna have a good time. You're gonna have a good time getting to see all that I have. And maybe you'll catch up to me before it comes back. And you'll probably do better than me for that matter. But continuing on. He drew the tales towards him with a mixture of natural affection and natural disgust, like a father taking a deformed infant into his arms. Phew, pshaw, exclaimed he, holding them at arm's length. It was Gray's idea of heaven, to lounge on a sofa and read new novels. Now, what more appropriate torture would Dante himself have contrived for the sinner who perpetrates a bad book than to be continually turning over the manuscript? It would fail of effect, said I, because a bad author is always his own great admirer. Nice. I lack that one characteristic of my tribe, the only desirable one, observed Oberon. But how many recollections throng upon me as I turn over these leaves. This scene came into my family. Oh, we're dead and back. Hang on. We get one disconnect per night, apparently. We should be back online, and I should be able to continue. I'll start this paragraph over real quick. I lack that one characteristic of my tribe, the only desirable one, observed Oberon. But how many recollections throng upon me as I turn over these leaves? This scene came into my fancy as I walked along a hilly road, on the starlit October evening, in the pure and bracing air. I became all soul, and felt as if I could climb the sky, and run a race along the Milky Way. Here was another tale, in which I wrapped myself during a dark and dreary night ride in the month of March, till the rattling of the wheels and the voices of my companions seemed like a faint sounds of a dream, and my visions a bright reality. That scribbled page describes shadows, which I summoned to my bedside at midnight. They would not depart when I bade them, and the grey dawn came and found me wide awake and feverish, the victim of my own enchantments. There must have been some sort of happiness in all this, said I, smitten with a strange longing to make proof of it. There may be happiness in a fever fit, replied the author, and then the various moods in which I wrote. Sometimes my ideas were like precious stones under earth, requiring toil to dig them up, and care to polish and brighten them. But often a delicious stream of thought would gush out upon the page at once, like water sparkling up suddenly in the desert. And when it had passed, I gnawed my pen hopelessly, or blundered on with the cold and miserable toil, as if there were a wall of ice between me and my subject. Do you now perceive a corresponding difference, inquired I, between the passages which you wrote so coldly, and those fervid flashes of the mind? No, said Oberon, tossing the manuscript on the table. I find no traces of the golden pen with which I wrote in characters of fire. My treasury of fairy coin is changed to worthless dross. My picture, painted in what seems the loveliest hues, presents nothing but a faded and indistinguishable surface. I have been eloquent and poetical and humorous in a dream, and behold, it is all nonsense now that I am awake. My friend now threw sticks of wood and dry chips upon the fire, seeing it blaze like Nebuchadnezzar's furnace, seized the champagne bottle, and drank 2 or 3 brimming bumpers successfully. The heady liquor combined with his agitation to throw him into a species of rage. The heady liquor combined with his agitation to throw him into a species of rage. He laid violent hands on the tail, and one instant more their faults and beauties would alike have vanished in a glowing purgatory. But all at once I remember the passages of high imagination, deep pathos, original thoughts, and points of such varied excellence, and the vastness of the sacrifice struck me most forcibly. I caught his arm. "Surely you do not mean to burn them?" "Let me alone!" cried Oberon, his eyes flashing fire. "I will burn them! Not a scorched syllable shall escape! What would you have me? Would you have me, a damned author, to undergo sneers, taunts, abuse, and cold neglect, and faint praise bestowed for pity's sake against the giver's conscience? A hissing and laughing stock to my own traitorous thoughts, an outlaw from the protection of the grave, one whose ashes every careless foot might spurn, unhonored in life and remembered scornfully in death. Am I to bear this, when yonder fire will ensure me from the whole? No! There go the tales! May my hand wither when it would write another." The deed was done. He had thrown the manuscripts into the hottest of the fire, which at first seemed to shrink away, but soon curled around them, and made them a part of its own fervent brightness. Oberon stood gazing at the conflagration, and shortly began to soliloquize, in the wildest strain, as if fancy resisted, and then became riotous, and at the moment when he would have compelled her to ascend that funeral pile. His words described objects which he appeared to discern in the fire, fed by his own precious thoughts. Perhaps the thousands of visions which the writer's magic had incorporated with these pages became visible to him in the dissolving heat, brightening forth ere they vanished forever, while the smoke in vivid sheets of flame, the vivid sheets of flame, the rutting and whitening coals, caught the aspect of a varied scenery. "They blaze," said he, "as if I had steeped them in the intensest spirit of genius. There I see my lovers clasped in each other's arms. How pure the flame that burst from their glowing hearts! And yonder the features of a villain, writhing in the fire that shall torment him to eternity. My holy men, my pious and angelic women, stand like martyrs amidst the flames, their mild eyes lifted heavenward. Ring out the bells, the city is on fire. See, destruction roars through my dark forests. All while lakes boil up in steaming billows, and the mountains are volcanoes, and the sky kindles with a lurid brightness. All elements are but one pervading flame. Ha! The fiend!" I was somewhat startled by the latter exclamation. All the tales were almost consumed. But just then drew forth a broad sheet of fire, which flickered as with laughter, making the whole room dance in its brightness, then roared up portentously up the chimney. "You saw him! You must have seen him!" cried Oberon. "How he glared at me and laughed in that last sheet of flame with the features that I imagined for him. Well, those tales are gone." The papers were indeed reduced to a heap of black cinders, with a multitude of sparks hurrying confusedly among them, the traces of the pen being now represented by wide lines, and the whole mass fluttering to and fro in the draughts of the air. The destroyer knelt down to look at them. "What is more potent than fire?" he said in his gloomiest tone. "He even thought, invisible and incorporeal as it is, cannot escape it. In this little time, it has annihilated the creations of long nights and days, which I could no more reproduce, in their first glow and freshness, than cause ashes and whitened bones to rise up and live. There, too, I sacrificed the unborn children of my mind. All that I had accomplished, all that I had planned for future years, has perished by one common ruin, and left only this heap of embers. The deed has been my fate, And what remains? A weary and aimless life, a long repentance of this hour, and at last an obscure grave, where they will bury and forget me. As the author concluded this dolorous moan, the extinguished embers arose and settled down, and arose once again, and finally flew up the chimney, like a demon with sable wings. Just as they disappeared, there was a loud cry. There was a loud and solitary cry in the street below us. Fire! 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 Other voices caught up that terrible word, and it speedily became the shout of a multitude. Oberon started to his feet in fresh excitement. "A fire is upon the night!" cried he. "The wind blows a gale, and wherever it whirls its flames, the roofs shall flash up like gunpowder. Every pump is frozen up, and boiling water would turn to ice the moment it was flung from the engine. In an hour, this wooden town will be one great bonfire. What a glorious scene for my Max!" Pshaw! The street was now all alive with footsteps, the air full of voices. We heard one engine thundering round a corner, another rattling from distance over pavements. The bells of 3 steeples clanged out at once, spreading the alarm to many a neighboring town, and expressing hurry, confusion, and terror, so imitably I could almost distinguish in the peal burden of the universal cry, "Fire! Fire! Fire!" "What is so eloquent in their iron tongues?" exclaimed Oberon. "My heart leaps and trembles, but not with fear. And that other sound, too, deep and awful as a mighty organ, the roar and thunder of a multitude on the pavement below. Come! We are losing time. I will cry out in the loudest of uproar, and mingle my spirit with the wildest of confusion, and be a bubble on top of the ferment." From the first outcry, my forebodings had warned me of the true object and center of alarm. There was nothing now but an uproar. Above, beneath, and around us, steps stumbling pell-mell up the public staircase, eager shouts and heavy thumps at the door, the whiz and dash of water from the engines, the crash of furniture thrown upon the pavement. At once, the truth flashed upon my friend. His frenzy took the hue of joy, and with a wild gesture of exultation he leaped almost to the ceiling of the chamber. "My tails!" cried Oberon. "The chimney! The roof! The fiend has gone forth by night and startled thousands in fear and wonder from their beds. Here I stand, a triumphant author! Huzzah! Huzzah! My brain has set the town on fire! Huzzah!" And so ends the tale of the devil in manuscript. Many authors' dreams can be your worst nightmare. Yeah, apparently Nathaniel Hawthorne also went mad towards the end of his life as well, so there's something to be said about creatives all being crazy. Alright. We've got 2 more stories, and then we might wrap it up early. I had 3 long tales, but we're already pushing 2 hours, so I'll continue reading from... I'll read 2 more short stories, and then I probably should call it. So, this next one. And I hope you've been enjoying this spooky night. This is definitely one of the more horror-oriented streams, aside from Little Nightmares. Glad you have, Flash. And I hope anybody enjoying the VOD is enjoying this too. Now this next one is simply titled Jingle Jangle by Kim Ventrella from the collection Don't Turn Out the Lights. This one should require a decent more amount of voice acting on my behalf, so let me get some water. Everyone in town knows about the Jingle Jangle Man. They say he lives behind the thorns, at the edge of the deep, dark wood. They say he grants wishes to those brave enough to call him. They say he'll cut off your skin and wear it like a jacket. But they say a lot of things. It can't all be true. It started the day my stepdaddy, Marlin, took the dog out for a drive and came back with blood on his shirt. I begged Mama to do something, to help me, but she said, "Shush up now. Don't let Marlin hear you." That's when I ran. Oh, that's Mama. "Shush up now. Don't let Marlin hear you." That's when I ran, all the way to Granny's house. "Please, why won't you tell me the words?" I squeezed her wrinkly hand. My body one big ache. I wanted my dog. I wanted Marlin to go away and never come back. I wanted a miracle. Granny considered, rolling a cigar between her teeth. "It's a fool's story, boy. Nothing more. Go on to bed." "But I know he grants wishes. Everyone says he does." "Wishes don't come free. There's a price to pay. A terrible price." Granny narrowed one eye, blowing a ring of smoke. "What else do you know?" "What else do you know?" "I know that if I go up to the thorn bushes and say the magic words, he'll appear, and then he'll grant my wishes, and it'll be like Marlin never existed. Then I'll find my dog, and Mama and I can be happy again." I paused, out of breath. "You hate Marlin too, Granny. I know you do." "He sells spirit NFTs, boy. You can't trust them crypto ghouls." "Hate is a nasty word, and nasty words bring trouble," Granny said. "You forget all about that devil story. Promise you will." "Okay, Granny. I promise." I didn't want to lie, but I had no choice. So that evening, while Granny fell asleep with a pile of cigar stubs in her lap, I slipped into her room. I knew about the box of old notebooks and diaries, and I knew Granny. She wrote everything down, especially secret things. Sure enough, in a dusty diary with a cracked leather cover, I found the words I needed. After that, it was easy to sneak out and trek across town, all the way to the edge of the deep, dark wood. I had been sitting here for a while now, overlooking a wall of thorns. Fogs roll past in lazy spirals, like huge, faceless ghosts. My lungs seize as shadows move behind the thorns, all thin and hunched and made of bone. It's him. I know it is. The answer to all my problems. Screwing up my courage, I take a deep breath and recite the words Granny wrote. Jingle, jangle, rib and claw. Open wide your filthy maw. A warm breeze blows aside the fog, and for a moment, a band of dusky sunlight touches my face. It settles on my cheeks and soothes the ache in my fingertips. I start to laugh, my sudden fear draining away. Because how could any of this be real? Then I hear it. Clink, clank, clink. Like wet bones rattling in the bottom of a well, it comes closer. Clink, clank, clink. I see him, silhouetted black against the late evening sun. He breaks through the thorn bushes and lopes over the dead brush, dragging a burlap sack. Up above, the clouds part, and he grins, Strips of flesh dangle from his jaw, blowing to and fro in the wind. Black beetles crawl along his ribcage and down his spine. My eyes drop to the sack trailing behind his decomposing feet. It isn't burlap at all, but a drooping lump of human skin, festered and cracked, leaving a trail of juices in its wake. I freeze, squeezing my arms tight around my chest. He's coming closer. Closer. He's here. His putrid stink fills my nostrils, and the sound of him wriggles in my ears. An entire orchestra of sound. There's the clink, clank, clink of dry, forgotten bones, the ticking of insect legs and shells, and the rustle of papery wings. Add to that the whistle of the wind through empty eye sockets, and finally the slush of wet skin gliding over dead grass. Put it together, and you've got the Jingle Jangle Man. A strand of greasy hair brushes my forehead, and I stop breathing. I peek between my fingers and see his face, the skin all rotten and melting, a single eyeball dangling by a pink cord. He reaches for me. I'm sure he plans to pull out my intestines and wear them like a scarf. But instead, he pats my head. Thank you. I'm free. He gurgles, lips numb. I whisper in his moldy ear. I can't tell if he hears my wish or not, but I'm relieved as he moves away, disappearing into the deep, dark shadows. I stay in the woods until the sun dies out, letting my pea-soaked shorts dry in the wind. I throw up twice in a thorn bush, imagining what I'll find if I get back home. I wonder if Granny was right. The hatred I felt toward Marlin has already turned cold and hard inside my chest. Maybe the Jingle Jingle Man didn't hear my wish. Maybe. The neighbors are waiting at the edge of a field when I return. Granny's there too, and she drags me into her arms. I warned you! Now look at what you've done. Her gaze drifts to Mama's house, and I know the Jingle Man must be inside. My wish. Everyone jumps as screams rip the air, followed by an long, eerie silence. Nobody moves, apart from the crickets and the flickering torches. It's full-on dark now, but I see him by torchlight as he exits the house. His bones look different. Plumper, somehow. Despite Granny's pleas, I step closer. He wears a piece of skin tied around his waist like a belt, and another draped jauntily around his neck. He walks towards me, and that's when I glimpse his feet, no longer rotting and bare, but encased in fleshy slippers. I recognize the hairy knuckles and the twisted sixth toe. Those belong to Marlin, I say, gazing up and into the horror of a face. He's wearing Marlin's nose on a string around his neck, and a familiar blue eyeball sits crooked in his left socket, oozing white pus. My wish. For me, he says, his voice wet and bubbling. His eyes pass greedily over my skin, and he splays his bony fingers, wanting payment. One by one, the neighbors hang their heads. There's a hush as Granny faints, her body dropping almost peacefully to the grasp. I want to help her, but a hand closes around my wrist. A hand with one of Marlin's fingers held on with a strip of duct tape. For me. I can tell he wants me to give him something. But what? I reach into my pocket and offer him the only thing I can find. A stick of gum with a ball of fuzz stuck to the tip. He blinks, and his left eye plops onto the grass at my feet.
special,
he says, cocking his head.
Must be special.
I don't have anything else, I say, watching as my neighbors turn and walk away. I promise, nothing but the skin on my back and this ugly house and...
I'll take that,
says the Jingle Jangle Man. What? He drops his fetid skin sack he carries and caresses my cheek.
A little small, but it'll stretch.
Time is different now. Behind the thorn bushes. Slowly, mostly I pace back and forth. Count the beetles crawling over my ribs. Skin sack is heavier than I imagined. Probably because it includes bits of marlin along with all the rest. Still, I drag it here and there. Spend hours flicking away the flies. Before, I wondered why he kept it. The spoiled, leaking hunk. Now I know. It gets cold at night, with the wind whistling through your bones. Some days, if I'm lucky, Granny comes to visit. My poor, poor boy, she says, peering at me from the shadow of an old oak.
Come closer, Granny,
I say, reaching my hand through the tangle of thorns. Bits of skin catch and peel off the bone. Granny's ancient shoulders sag. I warned you to stay away. Now you're trapped, just like the last one, and the one before that.
Then call me Granny. You know how. So I can be free.
With great effort, she stands and arranges her long skirt. Evil's never free. Welcome back, Chuck.
But it's me. I'm not evil. I would never hurt you.
A chilly wind rattles the dead branches, and I pull the skin sack closer to my chest.
Granny, I'm so cold.
I watch as she considers. Slowly, reluctantly, she sits down on the grass and begins to recite. Jingle, jangle. Skin and bone. I lean closer, my shriveled tongue dangling over my teeth. Meat and worms and rotten stone. I reach a hand through the thorns, my fingers opening and closing, longing for the touch of warm flesh.
Don't stop,
I say as Granny pauses, her weary eyes studying me in the morning sunlight.
Please.
With a long sigh, Granny continues, and my jaw opens in a smile. Be careful what you wish for. The tale of the monkey's paw is told many a time, and this one had its consequences. And finally, we have one last story to end off the night. We'll see if you can catch the twist on this one before it hits you in the face. It's very subtle. But I need to get more water. Just gonna hold up the book with one hand, pour with the other. All right. It's time for the final story of the night. One much less gruesome, thankfully, but just as dark. The Neighbor by Amy Lukavics is our final tale of the night. Thank you all for listening as long as you have. To those who have watched the VOD and made it this far, we appreciate you. And we appreciate any likes and subscriptions given during this time. So, let's start with the final story. One sip. As soon as Dennis woke up, he felt like he was being watched. When he got out of bed and opened his blinds to greet the morning like he always did, there was a little boy sitting in the yard across the road, staring. The presence of a neighbor was especially confusing because the house across the road was empty, and had been for years. Dennis would have noticed if people had moved in, because he played outside almost every day during summer vacation. And even when he wasn't outside, he was in the living room, where he had a full window view of the road and the unoccupied house. But he was there anyway, the new neighbor who appeared to be just about Dennis's age, sitting very still, with his eyes open very wide, unblinking. It's almost like he's been patiently waiting for me to wake up, Dennis thought. It gave him the chills. He turned away from his window, the new neighbor still on his mind as he ate some breakfast, put on his play clothes, and brushed his teeth. There was certainly something strange about the whole thing. But on the other hand, the idea of a new friend to play with during this long, boring break from school was exciting for Dennis. So, after he was finished eating, he went out the front door and checked to see if the boy was still there. He was. Dennis went across the road to introduce himself. "I'm Dennis," he said, and the boy grinned wide enough to show almost all his teeth. "I know. I'm Jones." "I know. I'm Jones." Now Dennis was even more puzzled. How could this boy possibly already know his name? "When did you move in?" Dennis asked, looking behind where Jones sat to the big, empty porch of the house. He didn't see any movement through the windows, and he didn't see a car parked in the yard either. "Where are your parents?" "Never mind them," Jones said, standing up and brushing the dirt from his already filthy pants, which Dennis guessed were originally white, but were now a grungy shade of brown. "Want to play with me today?" "Sure." Dennis had always wanted a neighbor to be his own age. Dennis always wanted a neighbor his own age to play with. So much so that he was willing to let go of the pit that had formed in his stomach the moment he saw Jones sitting on the ground staring at his window this morning. Maybe this new boy was a bit strange. And so what? Dennis would take what he could get. "Let's go," Jones shouted, and took off running for the woods beyond the road. "I have something really cool to show you." "Wait!" Dennis called after Jones, but he followed him nonetheless. "My mom says I'm not allowed to play in the woods." "It'll be fine," Jones yelled over his shoulder without slowing. "I've played in the woods my whole life." Dennis paused for just a moment before continuing to run. He had lived in his house for all of his 10 years and knew for a fact that he had never seen Jones before, or anybody in the house across the road, especially near the woods. Maybe Mom wouldn't get too mad at him if he told her that his new friend had been the one to suggest they play so far away from their houses. The woods were very dark. They smelled musty, almost like Dennis's basement after a rainstorm, and he wondered how many centipedes were near him in that very moment, burrowing and slithering and munching. Some of the trees had holes in them, but most of the holes were covered by cloudy layers of densely spun spider webs, which swayed in the breeze as Jones ran past them. "I'm a ghost hunter," Jones announced, slowing his run to a stop at last to pick up a long, gnarled stick, and he pointed the sharpened tip at Dennis. "And you're the ghost." "Ghost?" Dennis had always hated the idea of invisible dead people standing around watching him, whether from far away or very, very close. No breathing, no heartbeat, just cold air and the distant sound of tortured whispers. Hey, I'm right here. I'm not a ghost, but I'm definitely a dead guy. Dennis didn't get why some souls would choose to stick around. What would be so exciting about observing the land of the living anyway? He felt like after a while, it'd be impossible not to get angry about it. You're dead, they're alive, and you'd come to feel mean. You'd come to feel violent. And scariest of all, you'd become dangerously bored. If you were a ghost, you'd have all the time in the world, and eventually, you'd need to do something with all of those terrible feelings. Turn them into something. Make them become real. Goosebumps flourished over the back of Dennis's arms. He noticed that Jones was staring at him strangely, with his head sort of tilted to the side, like he was seeing something funny. You don't like ghosts very much, do you, Dennis? Jones asked, and now Dennis wished he had never broken the rules to come play in the woods after all. I don't care about ghosts, Dennis said, feeling his cheeks warm up with a lie. I mean, I don't really believe in them. Jones smiled. The stick in his hand still pointed threateningly at Dennis. Oh, come on. It's fun to believe in ghosts. Could you put that down? Dennis' mouth suddenly felt dry and longed for a drink of water. The stick, I mean. I don't really like it. Jones lowered the stick right away and tossed it aside into a baneberry bush. The bush was flush with beautiful red berries, smooth and shiny like tiny Christmas ornaments. But Dennis knew from a nature book he had at home that baneberries were poisonous. Don't eat those, he blurted, then felt embarrassed for himself because Jones wasn't even looking at the berries, let alone picking to eat them. Sorry about the stick, Jones said, ignoring the comment about the berries, which Dennis appreciated. I didn't mean to scare you or anything. I'm just trying to get you to relax. You seem like you really don't want to be friends. Dennis felt guilty for letting himself get so nervous about Jones. Who cared when he moved into the empty house across the road? Maybe his family had done it in the night, or very early in the morning before Dennis woke up. Maybe Jones's parents' car was parked in the garage, not the driveway, and that's why he hadn't seen it. Dennis couldn't believe how silly he'd been. Here was this boy trying to be friends with him, show him his favorite place to play. Jones probably lived in a house close by before he moved here, Dennis reasoned. That's why he said he'd played in these woods his whole life. Okay, just need to readjust. Don't apologize, Dennis said. And he felt the tense pit in his stomach finally start to dissolve. I'm the one who's sorry. I was feeling weird before, but I'm fine now. Let's play. So they did. Not ghost hunter and ghost, but general versus general, with each boy setting up their own little armies of things they found around the woods. Moss-covered chips of bark, rocks, sticks, grass, and poisonous berries. They had so much fun that Dennis lost track of time, and it was only when a bird somewhere in the woods shrieked loud enough to make them both jump that he realized he'd been enthralled in their game for hours. His eyes had adjusted to the dim lighting of the forest, but Dennis swore it was just a tad darker when they had arrived. I need to get home, Dennis said, standing up and wiping his muddy hands on his pants. My mother is going to kill me. I'm not even allowed to play out here, really. But I'll tell her tonight that it's fine because you know your way around. We should come back tomorrow. Yes, Jones agreed. He stood and stretched his arms above his head. That was very fun indeed. I haven't played like that in a long, long time. Jones began leading the way out, with Dennis close behind. The boys joked about their game and made plans for what new elements they could introduce tomorrow. Stuff like witches and curses and plagues. After a while, Dennis realized that they had been walking around for what felt like too long. They should have broken through the trees and had clear views of their houses by now. He mentioned it to Jones, who nodded firmly as they walked. Yep, he said, making his way around a small thicket. I wanted to show you something else really quick before we left. It'll only take a minute, and it's really cool. It's one I wanted to show you in the first place. A small spot of familiar discomfort budded in Dennis's stomach. But he ignored it. "Cool," he said. Suddenly, the trees gave way to a small clearing. In the clearing was an ancient-looking iron fence, no taller than Dennis's waist, which created a perimeter around a long slab of nearly black dirt that was riddled with gravestones. A filthy angel statue stood tall in the center of the graveyard, its hands extended to the canopy of tangled branches above. Years of no sun and dreary weather had caused the angel to look like a monster, all blank eyes, peeling paint, and dried mud. "What the heck?" Dennis said. "Why is there a cemetery all the way out here?" "It's really old," Jones said, leaning against the fence but not going inside. "People don't really use it anymore." Creepy. Dennis decided that when he got home, he would take a very hot shower and put on his pajamas and spend the rest of the day in bed reading comic books. "Let's go, or my mom might not let me come back tomorrow." "I wanted you to see this place," Jones answered as though his feelings were hurt. "It's important to me. This is where I used to live." Dennis's heart skipped a beat in his chest. "What? Yeah, okay." He let out a nervous laugh. "I lived under the ground," Jones continued, his eyes glued to one gravestone in particular, but the one directly in front of the angel statue. "But it was too cold and boring, so I started to dig. The wood that my box was made of was so old and so rotted that I was able to break through it right away. But the dirt outside the box was much harder, like cold clay. It took so much longer than I ever could have imagined. It felt like it took decades, Dennis." Dennis was paralyzed with fear. Jones had to have been lying. Obviously. Ghosts weren't real, and neither were dead boys who woke up in their graves and clawed their way out. Regardless, Dennis thought it was an awful thing to say, and it made him regret wanting to be friends. He suddenly saw Jones as he saw the poisonous red baneberries. All signs had been there to not fall prey to their bright, shiny idea of a new friend to play with, but Dennis had ignored his instincts. And now he was stuck in a creepy cemetery with a creepy boy and no idea how to get home if he tried to run. And then, after what felt like an eternity, I finally dug my way out. I found a house. I found you. I sat and waited for you to wake up, and then we became friends." Jones finally tore his eyes away from the grave and stared at Dennis without blinking. "We are friends, right, Dennis? We're best friends?" "Of course," Dennis answered right away. "We're definitely best friends. Now, come back. Let's come back here and play tomorrow." He was desperate to say anything that would make Jones show him the way home, fully ready to make promises he couldn't keep. "You could tell me more about how you came to live in the box under the ground." Good old Jones, yeah. It sounded ludicrous, but it only took a moment for Dennis to realize that it had worked. Jones broke into a grateful smile, his rigid stance relaxing as he stepped away from the fence. "It means a lot to me that you didn't get scared and run away. Most kids would have. You're a real, true friend. I never had a brother, but we could be brothers now." "Sure," Dennis said, nearly fainting from relief as Jones finally led him away from the graveyard and to the edge of the forest. He had never felt so happy to feel the warm sunshine in his face after they were back in the open field. Never imagined he would be so surprised to survive what had turned out to be such an unsettling day. He saw his house in the distance and felt such immense comfort that he almost wanted to cry. The rest of the walk home was silent. "Well," Dennis said once they were on the road that separated their front yards, ready to plant the seed in Jones' mind that he would not, in fact, be returning to the woods to play tomorrow. "I sure hope my mom doesn't ground me for playing out there without her permission." "I'm sure she'll understand. Just tell her you were with your new brother. Right, Dennis said, awkwardly sticking his hands into his pockets. Well, bye. See you around. See you around, Jones repeated, and watched Dennis walk up to his porch and disappear through the front door. As soon as he was safe inside, Dennis locked it and went straight to the kitchen, never more hopeful to get in trouble in his entire life. Yeah, that is certifiably creepy. As soon as he was safe inside, Dennis locked it and went straight to the kitchen, never more hopeful to get in trouble in his life. His mother stood at the stove, stirring a pot of garlicky-smelling tomato sauce for spaghetti. On the counter beside the stove was a tray of meatballs ready to be put into the oven. I'm home, Mom, Dennis said, waiting for her to demand where he'd been all day. Instead, she greeted him without turning around, softly asking him how his day was. You haven't been gone for that long in ages, she remarked before he could even answer. I was lonely. But I suppose it was nice to know you were doing something else besides hanging around here, making a racket because you were bored to death. But I went into the woods, he blurted, with a boy I never met before. Aren't you mad? Honey, we made that rule when you were 6 and got lost in there. Mom sighed, then lifted a spoonful of sauce from the pot and had a taste. You're capable of taking care of yourself by now, I imagine. Dennis didn't remember being lost in the woods when he was 6. He finished the day as he originally planned, with a hot shower and pajamas, and a comic book reading in bed. His mother even brought him dinner in his room, a huge steaming plate of spaghetti and meatballs with buttered bread and milk. And when the sun went down and his eyelids started getting heavy, Dennis turned off his bedroom light, then walked in the dark to the window to close the blinds, so that the sun wouldn't wake him up too early in the morning. But before he could close them, he saw something out the window that turned his blood cold. Outside, the moon shone brightly enough for Dennis to make out the road, and the house on the other side. Sitting cross-legged in the yard, facing Dennis's window, was Jones. The moonlight caused the grin on the new neighbor's face to glow. Dennis closed the blinds and fled to his bed, pulling the covers over his head and hardly daring move, convinced that at any moment he'd hear Jones tapping on his window, or worse, whispering to him from right outside the blanket. Dennis fell asleep that way, all curled up and afraid, dreaming of cold places underground and the sound of fingernails digging to get out. When he woke the next morning, he had a headache. Feeling braver in the daylight, Dennis checked the window again, sneakily, so that if Jones was still there, he wouldn't notice Dennis peering out. The yard across the road was empty. Thank goodness, Dennis thought. Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me last night. Suddenly, there came a knock from down the hall in the living room, where the front door was. Dennis rushed out of his room, his mother still sleeping. Dennis answered the door and nearly jumped out of his skin when he saw Jones standing right there on the porch. Ready to play, brother? Jones asked, wearing the same filthy clothes as yesterday. Dennis remembered the weird story about Jones digging himself out of his own grave and shuddered. Sorry, Dennis said, and tried as hard as to look like he meant it. I did end up getting in trouble yesterday for staying out all day and playing in the woods. Yeah, my mom said I have to stay home today and no friends. He half expected Jones to argue, and was relieved when the neighbor only gave off a little sigh and shrug of disappointment. That's a shame. Maybe tomorrow. All day, Dennis stayed inside. He sat in his bedroom, the blinds tightly shut, while his mother went about her business through the house. Nighttime came, at last, and he fell asleep reading comics on the floor. He woke up the next morning, sore and annoyed that Mom hadn't awoken him to move him into his bed. Slowly, he realized what had woken him up. Somebody was ringing the doorbell. At first, Dennis just lay there, waiting for his mother to answer the door. But minutes went by, and still the bell rang. Ding dong! Ding dong! Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He got up and tore down the hall, noticing that his mother's purse was gone from the hook next to the front door. Her car keys, too. She had left him alone without saying goodbye. He opened the front door, and there stood Jones. Dennis stared at him with a frown, suddenly angry that the reason he had such an awful, boring day yesterday was all because he had been scared of this weird kid from across the street. Dennis looked over at Jones' shoulder, desperately hopeful to spot some parents or grandparents, or anyone who might be keeping close track of their child. But of course, there was nobody. Ready to play, brother? No, Dennis said, then quickly corrected himself. I mean, I'm still in trouble. I'm not allowed. My mom was really mad. She may not let me leave for the rest of summer. To Dennis, it felt like the lie was glaringly obvious, and he was ashamed of it. But Jones listened thoughtfully, as though Dennis would never lie to him, because they were brothers now, after all. Weren't they? That's not fair, Jones decided after a long silence. You shouldn't have to stay in this house forever. You should be able to come outside and play with me whenever you want. Your mother is very selfish for not letting you leave. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Dennis said with uncertainty. It's too bad. I'm sorry, Jones. Maybe I'll see you when school starts. Something should really be done about her. Jones narrowed his eyes. It's not fair that she keeps you trapped like this. Dennis wondered how his mom would feel if she knew he had tricked the new neighbor into thinking he was awful. She was awful. It hurt his heart a little bit, because of how nice and loving she actually was. He wished his mother were here right now, but then again, maybe it was for the best that she was gone. Otherwise, she might invite Jones to come inside. Bye, Jones, Dennis said, and closed the door before the boy could respond. Dennis quietly made his way to the living room, then peeked very carefully through the curtains to spy on Jones. As Dennis watched, Jones walked slowly across the road and to the woods in the distance. Right before he went to the tree line, Jones turned back and waved. Dennis's stomach did a flop, and he hurried to get dressed and put on his sneakers. He got on his bike and pedaled down the dirt road, away from his house and Jones's house and the woods, and almost 30 minutes before reaching his destination. The gas station was Dennis's favorite place to buy candy and chips and soda and cherry slushes. And now more than ever, he sought out the comfort of a snack attack while in a place far away from Jones. But he soon noticed that after pulling in that the lot was empty. When he tried to go inside, he found the doors were locked. Come on, he growled under his breath, jostling the door again as if it would magically unlock it. Why were they closed in the middle of the day? He cupped his hands and peered through the glass. The entire building was stripped and empty. It didn't make any sense. Hadn't Dennis been here a few days ago? Before he met Jones, to get a popsicle? The memory is fuzzy in the way that made Dennis nervous. Looking around, Dennis noticed that the gas station was not only closed, it was like it had been closed for years. Thick layers of dust covered the pumps, which were missing the gas nozzles. The sign that usually announced whatever was on sale was faded and covered in graffiti. Dennis suddenly felt faint with fear. Something wasn't right here. Something was very wrong. He got back on his bike and pedaled hard for home, hoping with all his heart that his mother would be there by the time he returned. He didn't care if it made him look like a baby. All he wanted right now was to cry to her and hug her and tell her about everything that had happened since he woke up 2 days before to the sight of a little boy sitting in the yard of a house across the street. The sun was hot on Dennis's back, but he didn't sweat. Finally, he turned off the old dirt road that would eventually lead to his house. And as he approached, he spotted his mother's car in the driveway. Thank goodness! His legs were weak and shaky from all that pedaling. Dennis abandoned the bike in the front yard and began to make his way for the front door before stopping dead in his tracks. Jones was on the porch, sitting on the porch. Behind him, the door was wide open. knocking itself over and over against the wooden rack inside that held everybody's shoes. On the floor, blown by the wind. Clunk, clank, clunk. Okay, let me read that one more time because I didn't read that. I was stumbling. Jones was sitting on the porch. Behind him, the door was wide open, knocking itself over and over against the wooden rack just inside that held everybody's shoes, blown by the wind. Clunk, clunk, clunk. On the floor, Dennis spotted his mother's purse, sprawled sideways on the ground, as though it had been dropped. The purse was clotted with a thick, dark, red liquid. "I asked her nicely," Jones said, standing grinning at Dennis wide enough to show all his teeth. "Ready to play, brother?" After the police finished at Dennis's house, they went to interview the closest neighbor, an old woman named Harriet who had lived a few miles away and often had Dennis's mother over for lunch or afternoon cards. Harriet told the police that Dennis's mother had lived a very hard and lonely life, and was never able to work through the grief of losing her son after he wandered off and disappeared in the nearby woods when he was 6. She even claimed that the boy's ghost visited her, making sounds through the house, opening and closing the doors, running the water in the sink or shower, supposedly speaking to her from time to time. The police told Harriet that they'd found plates of food in the boy's bedroom, which had been kept intact since the disappearance. Harriet sighed and said that Dennis's mom always brought him food, insisting that he liked it, even if he never ate it. "It's such a shame what happened to her," Harriet said with tears in her eyes. "Such a lovely woman." Months later, after the house was cleaned and sold, the new family who moved in encouraged their daughter to explore the beautiful open land, enjoy their new and infinitely more peaceful life away from the city they'd left behind. The daughter roamed all around outside, even peeking into the windows of an empty house across the road, before eventually working her way through the field and to the woods in the distance. That night, she told her parents she never wanted to go into the woods again. Apparently, she had heard what sounded like 2 boys playing, whispering in her ear about joining them. Ghosts versus ghost hunter. One of the ghosts was new to the forest, they said, but the other had been around for a long, long time, and both would be stuck as children forever. The newer ghost had died in the woods when he was 6, but with no grave to dig himself out of, his confused spirit wandered home out of habit, and he was never able to break away from the routine of haunting his own mother in order to keep her company. The older ghost had helped him escape at last, let go of his mother and the routine that had blurred time together so forcefully, and returned to the place where his body had rotted into the ground, and where he could now roam and play free, forever. That's what ghosts do for each other. That's what ghosts do for each other, the voice said to the girl. Just like brothers. Play with us. Join us. But the girl couldn't see any of the boys, or anyone in the woods at all. She could only hear the whispers and giggles before something pulled her braid with a sharp tug and sent her sprinting. It had scared her half to death. She hadn't even noticed the cemetery as she fled, where 2 boys sat cross-legged in front of a gravestone marked with this name, Jones. Oh, Dank, you have the worst timing. We were just about to wrap up for the night. And good news, the Telltale Heart was at the beginning of the program. So once this VOD goes up, you can treat yourself to a spooky tale, courtesy of yours truly. Hope you're having a good... Hope you had a good evening. Yeah! Nice! Wear it in good health and enjoy the comfort of cotton, of fine ring-spun cotton, my friend. I've read The Telltale Heart in class. Nice. Yeah. It was a monstrous performance. I don't think I could do it again twice in one night. Haha. Ooh. Yeah, that's right. Both of y'all have a VIP polo. Well. Yeah, I really did. The last one is a long one, and it's already 9:30. And I am famished and tired and have plenty to catch up on. So, I'll just ask this. What'd you think, y'all? Did you enjoy listening to old bones read by the fireside? Even if Dan couldn't catch all of it? Excellent. Excellent. I'm glad to have rattled your spine a little bit on this first full week of Spooktober. I always enjoy reading this stuff, and I always enjoy reading stories like this, and I'm glad y'all give me an outlet to do so. But, regrettably, that's where our storybooking ends. So I'll go ahead and put this tome away. And I'll thank y'all for joining me on an excellent Halloween-themed night. Schedule will be up as per usual tomorrow. I have to go take my leave so I can prep all of the waiting rooms for the next week. But I will tell you this. I'll decide if I feel like doing a Fall Guys Gorilla stream. It's unlikely, because I've already got a full stack of streams prepped for next week. And I've got a big collab going on with Phantom, Sky, Anna, and a couple of other new faces I've never seen, so look forward to that. It'll be Left 4 Dead 2 Versus, and I'm sure I'm going to claim a couple of lives. But, as always, thank you very much for giving me your time. Thank you very much for all the likes and subscriptions and ears to my tales of terror. And most importantly, thank you for keeping me company on this dark and spooky night like tonight. Yes, B, you have the floor. Listen to that fire crackle. I need your little friend you keep on your desk. I want him too. Not gonna lie. He's really cool. I call him Ernesto. I think that's his name. But this is actually a very, very cool free PNG asset that I dug up a while back. I don't remember the name, but I'm sure I've got the file name somewhere. But yeah. There's gotta be something, like... Seems to be something in the fireplace. Go for it. I don't think you can get the red beady eyes without some LEDs in it, but that's definitely a vibe, I cannot lie. The roses make it all the better. But yeah. My voice is going, my stomach is gonna growl any second now, so I best be off, folks. Thank you for joining me for another year of reading spooky stories, and as always, memento vivere, memento mori. Which, if you didn't know by now, means remember to live, and remember you must die. And enjoy writing your life story. I'd love to see the pictures of it, B. I'd love to see the pictures of it. Have a good night, everybody. Sleep well. Ignore the fact that I just got smaller for a second. Good night.